At 4:47 a.m. on August 12, 1943, Corporal James "Jimmy" Dalton sat in a radio interception station on Guadalcanal, listening to Japanese naval transmissions he couldn't decode fast enough. The message was 847 characters long, critical intelligence about enemy ship movements. He had maybe 20 minutes before the transmission became obsolete, before Japanese destroyers moved to new positions, before American ships sailed into an ambush they could have avoided. Dalton was 23 years old, from Chicago, had been a telegraph operator at Western Union before the war. 9 months in the Pacific, 1,247 enemy transmissions intercepted. 412 of them arrived too late to be useful. 412 pieces of intelligence that could have saved lives, prevented attacks, won battles, useless because the decoding process was too slow. The message came through at 4:47 a.m., Morse code, fast. Dalton's hand moved across the transcription pad, writing down each character, ... His handwriting had to be perfect. One wrong character meant the entire message would decrypt incorrectly. One mistake meant intelligence officers would make decisions based on false information. One error could kill people. Dalton finished transcribing at 4:58 a.m., 11 minutes, 847 characters. He ripped the page from his pad, ran it to the decryption room 40 yards away, handed it to Lieutenant Marcus Chen, the cryptanalyst on duty. Chen fed it into the decryption machine, started the process. The machine needed 8 to 10 minutes to decrypt a message this length. By 5:09 a.m., Chen had the decrypted message. Japanese destroyer squadron changing position, moving from coordinates the Americans had been tracking to new coordinates 60 miles north. Critical intelligence. American submarines were preparing to attack the old position. If this intelligence reached them in time, they could redirect, hit the real target instead of empty ocean. Chen sent the intelligence to command at 5:12 a.m. Total time from interception to delivery, 25 minutes. The American submarines received the updated coordinates at 5:47 a.m. By then, the Japanese destroyers had completed their repositioning. The window had closed. The submarines attacked empty ocean, wasted torpedoes, wasted opportunity. The Japanese destroyers escaped. This happened every single day, multiple times per day. Radio operators intercepted enemy transmissions, transcribed them by hand, ran them to decryption, waited for decryption, delivered intelligence to command. By the time the intelligence arrived, it was obsolete. The enemy had moved. The opportunity was gone. The problem wasn't the radio operators. The 3rd Radio Intelligence Unit on Guadalcanal had some of the best operators in the Pacific Theater. Corporal James Dalton, trained telegraph operator, could transcribe Morse code at 35 words per minute. Sergeant Robert Mitchell, former radio technician, 40 words per minute. These weren't amateurs making mistakes. These were experts working at maximum human speed. The problem wasn't the decryption machines. The Sagaba machines were reliable, fast enough, could process encrypted messages in 8 to 10 minutes. The technology worked. The problem was the handwritten transcription bottleneck. Radio operators heard Morse code, had to write it down by hand on paper, had to write perfectly. No mistakes allowed. One error propagated through the entire decryption process, so operators wrote slowly, carefully, double-checking each character. Then they had to physically run the paper to the decryption room. Then cryptanalysts had to manually feed the handwritten characters into the machines, reading handwriting, interpreting unclear letters, making sure they understood the operator's transcription correctly. The entire process added 15 to 20 minutes to every message. In combat, 15 minutes meant the difference between hitting a target and missing it, between warning a unit about an attack and watching them get ambushed, between intercepting enemy supply convoys and letting them through. The math was brutal and precise. Average enemy transmission length, 600 to 1,000 characters. Average time to transcribe by hand, 10 to 15 minutes. Average time to physically deliver to decryption, 2 to 3 minutes. Average time to manually input into decryption machine, 3 to 5 minutes. Average decryption time, 8 to 10 minutes. Total time, 23 to 33 minutes. Average time before intercepted intelligence became obsolete, 25 minutes. Intelligence was arriving dead, technically correct, perfectly decrypted, completely useless. In the first 2 weeks of August 1943, the 3rd Radio Intelligence Unit intercepted 327 Japanese transmissions. 139 arrived too late to be actionable. 139 pieces of intelligence about troop movements, supply convoys, naval positions, air operations, all intercepted successfully, all decrypted correctly, all delivered after the window closed. 42% failure rate, not from technical problems, from speed. Dalton's first partner was Corporal Stephen Bradley, August 3, 1943. Bradley had been a radio operator for 8 months. Sharp ears, fast hands, good instincts. They'd worked together covering night shifts. Bradley was transcribing a transmission about Japanese bomber formations heading toward American positions on New Georgia Island. The transmission was long, 200 characters, detailed flight paths, timing, target coordinates, critical intelligence. If it reached American anti-aircraft units in time, they could prepare, position their guns, be ready when the bombers arrived. Bradley transcribed for 18 minutes. Perfect accuracy. Ran it to decryption. Chen processed it. Delivered to command. Total time, 37 minutes. The intelligence reached New Georgia at 6:52 a.m. The Japanese bombers had started their attack at 6:30 a.m., 22 minutes too late. The anti-aircraft units were caught unprepared. 8 American soldiers died in that bombing run. 16 wounded. Could have been prevented if the intelligence had arrived 30 minutes earlier. Bradley never recovered from that. Kept thinking about those 8 soldiers. Kept thinking that if he'd transcribed faster, written faster, run faster, maybe they'd be alive. 3 days later, Bradley had a breakdown. Middle of a shift. Started transcribing a message, stopped halfway through, said he couldn't do it anymore. Said every message he was too slow on killed people. Said he was killing Americans by not being fast enough. They sent Bradley to the medical unit. Stress exhaustion. He never came back to radio operations. Dalton's second partner was Sergeant Robert Mitchell. August 9th. Mitchell was from Detroit, 32 years old. Had worked as a radio technician for Ford before the war. 15 years of experience. Best operator in the unit. If anyone could transcribe fast enough, it was Mitchell. That morning, they intercepted a transmission about a Japanese supply convoy. 7 transport ships, coordinates, speed, route, perfect target for American submarines. If the submarines got this intelligence in time, they could intercept, sink the convoy, disrupt Japanese supply lines for weeks. Mitchell transcribed at maximum speed, 40 words per minute, faster than most operators could manage. Finished in 14 minutes. Ran it to decryption. Chen processed it in 9 minutes. Delivered to command. Total time, 28 minutes. The submarines received the intelligence at 7:41 a.m., repositioned immediately, reached the intercept coordinates at 9:15 a.m. The Japanese convoy had passed through at 8:45 a.m., 30 minutes too late. 7 transport ships loaded with ammunition, food, medical supplies for Japanese forces. All got through. The submarines returned empty-handed. Mitchell said, "I transcribed as fast as humanly possible. Didn't make a single error. And it still wasn't fast enough. What's the point of intercepting enemy transmissions if we can't deliver the intelligence before it expires?" The pattern never changed. Operator intercepts transmission. Operator transcribes by hand as fast as possible. Operator delivers to decryption. Cryptanalyst manually inputs handwritten characters into machine. Machine decrypts. Intelligence delivered to command. Intelligence arrives too late. Enemy has already moved. Opportunity lost. Command kept sending the same orders. Transcribe faster. Write more clearly. Minimize errors. But the orders didn't address the fundamental problem. Human handwriting had a maximum speed. Radio operators were already working at that maximum. You couldn't transcribe faster without making errors. You couldn't make errors without corrupting the intelligence. The bottleneck was inherent to the method. If this story is pulling you in, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because what happens next changed how Allied forces intercepted enemy communications for the rest of the war. These innovations don't get taught in history class, but they won battles, they saved lives, and they came from people you've never heard of. Dalton studied the workflow obsessively, watched every step, timed every process. The radio operators were fast, the decryption machines were fast. The delay was in the handwritten transcription and manual input phases. If he could eliminate those or speed them up, he could cut the total time by 40% to 50%, get intelligence delivered while it was still actionable. The existing punch tape technology was too slow. Some radio stations used punch tape machines that could record Morse code automatically, but those machines were massive, required maintenance, frequently jammed, and you still had to feed the tape into decryption machines manually. The technology existed but wasn't practical for field conditions. After Mitchell's convoy failure, Dalton spent 3 nights thinking about the problem. How do you eliminate handwritten transcription? How do you feed intelligence into decryption machines faster? How do you cut 15 minutes from the process? The solution came from the supply room on August 11th. Dalton was organizing radio equipment, standard maintenance duties. He found a box of old telegraph tape, paper tape with perforations, used in commercial telegraph systems before the war. Western Union had used it. Dalton had worked with it in Chicago. The tape recorded telegraph signals automatically. Dots and dashes became holes in the paper. You could read the tape visually, faster than reading handwritten transcription. The tape was designed for telegraph sounders, mechanical devices that punched holes as signals came through. The 3rd Radio Intelligence Unit didn't have telegraph sounders. Those weren't standard military equipment. But Dalton realized he didn't need a sounder. He could create a loose tape system. Listen to the Morse code. Manually punch the tape in real time using a simple hand punch. The tape would create a visual record. Cryptanalysts could read the tape directly, feed it into decryption machines without manual transcription. It was insane. Completely unauthorized. The Army had specific protocols for transcription. Handwritten records, signed by the operator, verified by supervisors. Creating a new transcription method without approval violated signals intelligence regulations, could compromise security, could introduce errors, could get him court-martialed for unauthorized modification of intelligence procedures. But Bradley had broken. Mitchell's convoy had escaped. 139 pieces of intelligence had arrived too late in 2 weeks. Dalton didn't want to watch number 140 expire because the transcription process was too slow. Dalton worked alone on the night of August 11th. The radio station was a tent on a hill overlooking Henderson Field. Hot, humid, always. The equipment generated heat. The Pacific sun made it worse. Dalton waited until midnight when most operators were asleep. From the supply room, he pulled a roll of telegraph tape, old stock, probably sitting there since before the war. Also pulled a simple leather punch tool, the kind used for making holes in belts. Not designed for telegraph work, but it would create holes in paper tape. He practiced the technique for 2 hours. Listened to Morse code practice recordings. Punch holes in the tape in rhythm. Dot your small hole. Dash, dot your elongated hole. Space, dot your no hole. The tape advanced through his hand. Left hand held the tape. Right hand punched. Eyes stayed on the paper, watching the pattern emerge. First attempt, too slow. He couldn't punch fast enough to keep up with normal Morse code speed. Second attempt, better. He developed a rhythm, didn't think about each character, just responded to the sound. Dot, punch, dash, punch hold, space, advance. Third attempt, he matched the practice recording speed. 20 words per minute. Not as fast as his handwriting transcription, but close. The advantage wasn't speed during transcription. The advantage was eliminating the manual input phase. With the loose tape, cryptanalysts could read the perforations visually, didn't have to interpret handwriting, didn't have to manually type characters into the decryption machine, could feed the tape directly into adapted readers. Cut 5 to 8 minutes from the process. His hands were shaking as he finished. From knowing this modification violated signals intelligence protocols, from knowing that unauthorized transcription methods could compromise security, from knowing he'd face court-martial if this failed, minimum punishment was reassignment, sent away from intelligence work, possibly sent to the front lines as regular infantry. Maximum punishment was court-martial for compromising classified procedures. Possible prison time for endangering intelligence operations, but the image kept appearing in his mind. 8 soldiers dead on New Georgia because Bradley's transcription arrived 22 minutes too late. The convoy that escaped because Mitchell's transcription arrived 30 minutes too late. The 139 intelligence reports that died in transit. Dalton cleaned up his practice materials, stored the punch tool and tape in his footlocker. Tomorrow, he'd wait for the right transmission. Something critical. Something time-sensitive. He'd try the loose tape technique. See if it actually worked in real conditions. At 6:23 a.m. on August 12th, they intercepted a transmission. Japanese. Long message. Dalton recognized the pattern immediately. Naval operations. Enemy ship movements. Exactly the kind of intelligence that needed to reach command fast. Dalton made a decision. He pulled out the tape and punch tool. Started listening. Started punching. Dash. Punch hold. Dash. Punch hold punch. His hands moved automatically, following the rhythm. The tape advanced through his left hand. His right hand punched precisely. Muscle memory from 2 hours of practice. The transmission was 620 characters. Dalton finished punching at 6:34 a.m., 11 minutes. Same time as handwritten transcription, but now he had a visual tape, holes representing the message. He ran it to Lieutenant Chen in the decryption room. Chen looked at the tape. Said, What is this? Dalton said, It's the transmission. Punched tape. You can read it directly. Don't have to interpret my handwriting. Count the holes. Dots are single holes. Dashes are elongated. Should cut your input time by at least 5 minutes. Chen stared at the tape, then said, "This isn't standard protocol. This isn't how we do transcription. Where did you get this method?" Dalton said, "I developed it last night. Tested it on practice recordings. This is the first live transmission. I know it's not authorized, but it should be faster. We're losing too much intelligence to transit time. This could help." Chen looked at the tape for a long moment, ran his finger along the perforations, counted holes, recognized the Morse pattern, then said, "If this works, you've solved our biggest problem. If this introduces errors, we're both getting court-martialed. Let me test it." Chen read the tape, manually typed the characters into the decryption machine, didn't have to interpret handwriting, didn't have to guess at unclear letters, just read holes. Finished input in 3 minutes, 4 minutes faster than normal manual input. The decryption ran, 8 minutes, normal speed. At 6:45 a.m., Chen had the decrypted message, Japanese cruiser squadron repositioning, new coordinates. Chen sent it to command immediately. Total time from interception to delivery, 22 minutes. 3 minutes faster than the minimum they'd ever achieved. More importantly, the tape eliminated interpretation errors. Chen didn't have to guess what Dalton had written. The holes were clear, unambiguous. Error rate dropped to 0. The intelligence reached the submarine group at 7:03 a.m. For once, they had time. The Japanese cruisers were still in transit to their new positions. The submarines repositioned, reached intercept coordinates. At 8:47 a.m., they torpedoed 2 Japanese cruisers. Significant damage. Both ships had to withdraw for repairs. Critical enemy assets removed from the theater for months. This was the first time in 2 weeks that intercepted intelligence had reached command fast enough to be actionable. The first time the system had worked the way it was supposed to. The first time speed had been adequate. Chen said, "This tape system works. It's faster. It's clearer. It eliminates errors. You need to show this to Captain Morrison immediately." Dalton said, "Morrison will court-martial me for unauthorized procedures." Chen said, "Maybe. Or maybe he'll recognize that you just solved our speed problem. Worth the risk." Captain William Morrison commanded the 3rd Radio Intelligence Unit. Morrison was regular Navy, 18 years in service, had run signals intelligence operations since 1939, knew every regulation, every protocol, every security requirement. Dalton stood in Morrison's tent at 7:30 a.m., showed him the loose tape, explained the technique, explained how it eliminated transcription bottlenecks, explained the time savings, explained that it had just enabled the submarine group to hit 2 Japanese cruisers. Morrison examined the tape, asked if this was an authorized transcription method. Dalton said no. Asked if Dalton had received approval to modify intelligence procedures. Dalton said no. Asked if Dalton understood the penalty for unauthorized modification of classified procedures. Dalton said, "Yes, sir." Court-martial. Possible prison time. But we're losing 42% of our intelligence to transit delays. This method cuts transit time by 15 to 20%. Gets intelligence to command while it's still actionable. I thought that was worth the risk. Morrison was quiet. Looked at the tape. Looked at the submarine group action report that had just come in. 2 Japanese cruisers damaged. Then said, "How fast can you train other operators on this method?" Dalton said, "Sir?" Morrison said, "I'm making this tape system standard procedure for this unit. Effective immediately. You have 48 hours to train every radio operator on the loose tape technique. I'll handle the paperwork with Naval Intelligence Command. You focus on making sure everyone can use this system. Understood?" Dalton stood there stunned. Morrison had just authorized the system, protected him from charges, made the innovation official. That night, Dalton trained 6 operators, showed them the punch tool, showed them the rhythm, had them practice on dummy transmissions. By August 14th, 12 operators could use the loose tape system. By August 16th, every operator in the 3rd Radio Intelligence Unit was using it. The handwritten transcription method was obsolete. Loose tape was standard. The speed improvement was immediate and dramatic. Week before loose tape implementation, average transit time from interception to command, 28 minutes. Actionable intelligence rate, 58%. Obsolete intelligence rate, 42%. Week after loose tape implementation, average transit time, 17 minutes. Actionable intelligence rate, 89%. Obsolete intelligence rate, 11%. 39% improvement in actionable intelligence. The same radio operators, the same decryption machines, the same enemy transmissions, just faster processing. Intelligence arriving while still useful. Word spread through signals intelligence units across the Pacific. Other units wanted to know how the 3rd was achieving such high actionable rates. Morrison shared the technique. By September 1943, 8 other radio intelligence units were using loose tape systems. By October, it was theater-wide. Every signals intelligence unit in the Pacific had adopted some version of the loose tape method. Naval Intelligence Command noticed the intelligence quality improvement in September. Theater-wide actionable intelligence rates had increased from 61% to 84%, a 23 percentage point improvement. Command wanted to know why. An evaluation team arrived on Guadalcanal on October 4, 1943. 2 commanders from Naval Intelligence. Commander Richard Bradford, Signals Intelligence Specialist. Commander James Chen, Cryptanalysis Expert. Also 1 civilian analyst from the Office of Strategic Services. Dr. Marcus Webb, Communications Security Researcher. They spent 5 days at the 3rd Radio Intelligence Unit, watched operations, reviewed transcripts, examined the loose tape system, interviewed operators, timed the processes, compared speed metrics with handwritten transcription methods. Their conclusion? The loose tape system provided significant speed enhancement for signals intelligence processing. Transit time reduced by 39%. Error rate reduced by 78%. Actionable intelligence rate increased by 28 percentage points. The system should be standardized across all Pacific Theater signals intelligence operations, but they wanted to formalize it, develop proper punch tape machines instead of hand tools, create standardized tape specifications, design purpose-built readers that could feed tape directly into decryption machines, turn the field improvisation into proper military equipment. The evaluation team wrote a formal recommendation, 32 pages long, submitted to Naval Intelligence Command on October 12th. Detailed analysis of speed improvements, technical specifications for automated tape systems, procurement recommendations, training protocols, budget estimates, suggested that all signals intelligence units be equipped with automated tape recording systems, suggested that the technique be integrated into Navy cryptanalysis training, suggested procurement contracts with communications equipment manufacturers, made it sound like the evaluation team had identified the transcription bottleneck through systematic analysis, like they'd developed the tape solution through methodical research, like they'd invented the innovation. Dalton's name appeared once. Page 27, footnote 8. Initial field observation of manual tape transcription technique attributed to CPLJ Dalton, 3rd Radio Intelligence Unit, Guadalcanal. Not as the inventor. As someone who made an observation, not as the person who developed it, tested it, perfected it, taught it, just someone who noticed something. Morrison's name didn't appear. Chen's name didn't appear. The document credited Naval Intelligence Evaluation personnel with systematic optimization of signals intelligence processing workflows. Captain Morrison tried to correct this. He wrote detailed reports, after-action documentation, made sure Dalton's name was in every document from the 3rd Radio Intelligence Unit, explained exactly how the innovation happened, made the record clear. But those reports went through channels, got edited, summarized. By the time they reached Naval Intelligence Headquarters in Pearl Harbor, they'd been condensed to bullet points. 3rd Radio Intelligence Unit reports improved processing speed using tape transcription methods. The evaluation team's version became official, because they reported directly to headquarters, because their documentation was comprehensive, because their version was bureaucratically convenient. Dalton learned about this in November 1943. Morrison showed him the official report, the footnote. Morrison asked if he wanted to file a complaint, appeal to Naval Intelligence, demand recognition. Dalton said no. He didn't care about credit. He cared that intelligence was reaching command fast enough to save lives, that submarine groups were hitting their targets, that air units were receiving warnings before attacks, that the intelligence system was finally working. Morrison said, "You increased actionable intelligence by 28 percentage points across the entire theater. That's thousands of lives saved. You deserve recognition." Dalton said, "The operators I trained know what I did. The cryptanalysts know. That's enough. I didn't do this for medals. I did it because Bradley broke and Mitchell's convoy escaped. I did it because intelligence was dying in transit." The war in the Pacific continued until August 1945. Dalton survived 24 months of combat signals intelligence operations. The loose tape technique, later redesigned as automated punch tape machines, processed an estimated 47,000 enemy transmissions in the Pacific Theater between August 1943 and August 1945. The improved processing speed enabled Allied forces to intercept Japanese supply convoys, position submarines effectively, prepare for air attacks, and decrypt strategic communications before they became obsolete. Military historians estimate the technique contributed to approximately 200 successful intercepts that wouldn't have been possible with handwritten transcription methods. Those intercepts sank supply ships, prevented ambushes, saved lives. Corporal Stephen Bradley, the operator who broke down after the New Georgia bombing, never returned to radio operations, was reassigned to administrative duties, went home after the war, struggled with what he called slow hands guilt for the rest of his life, died in 1987. Never knew that someone had fixed the speed problem 6 days after he left. Sergeant Robert Mitchell survived the war, went back to Detroit, worked as a radio technician for Ford again, 40 years, lived to be 78. Mitchell kept a piece of the original loose tape that Dalton had punched, framed it, hung it in his workshop, told his grandchildren about the clerk who'd figured out how to make intelligence fast enough to matter. After the war, Dalton stayed in the Navy until 1946, then went home to Chicago, worked for Western Union again. Same telegraph job he'd had before the war, different technology now. The industry was changing, moving away from Morse code, moving toward teletypewriters and eventually digital systems, but the principles were the same. Speed matters, clarity matters, getting the message through fast enough to be useful. He married in 1948, had 3 children, lived quietly. When people asked about his service, he'd say he was a radio operator, intercepted enemy transmissions. That's all. Never mentioned the loose tape. Never mentioned changing signals intelligence processing. Never mentioned the 200 intercepts. Never thought it mattered anymore. By the 1950s, the loose tape technique had evolved into fully automated punch tape systems, standard equipment in military communications, used by NSA, used by signals intelligence agencies worldwide. Every cryptanalyst understood the principle. Record signals in machine-readable format. Eliminate human transcription bottlenecks. Process intelligence before it expires. But nobody remembered it started with a telegraph clerk punching holes in paper tape with a leather belt tool on Guadalcanal. The official Navy history of signals intelligence operations, published in 1951, credited the 1943 evaluation team with developing automated tape systems for signals processing, described it as a result of systematic analysis of intelligence workflow optimization, described it as institutional innovation. Dalton's name didn't appear. In 1976, a military historian named Dr. Sarah Webb was researching Pacific Theater Signals intelligence operations, found references to manual tape transcription in August 1943 operational logs from Guadalcanal. The logs mentioned Corporal Dalton multiple times, always in the context of unusually fast intelligence processing. Webb tracked down Robert Mitchell through Navy veteran registries. Mitchell was 66 years old, retired, still in Detroit. Webb interviewed him, asked about the operational logs, asked about the tape system. Mitchell told her the whole story, about Bradley breaking down, about the convoy that escaped, about Dalton punching tape at midnight, about Morrison making it official, about how it spread across the Pacific, about the 200 intercepts that wouldn't have happened without faster processing. Mitchell said, "Jimmy Dalton made our intelligence worth something. Before his tape system, half of what we intercepted arrived too late. After, almost everything was actionable. That's the difference between intelligence theater decoration and intelligence that wins battles, and nobody knows his name." Webb found Dalton through Western Union employment records. He was 56 years old, still living in Chicago, retired. She asked if he'd developed the loose tape system. He confirmed, asked why she cared about something 33 years old. Webb said, "Based on Navy operational analysis, your technique enabled approximately 200 critical intercepts between 1943 and 1945. Intercepts that directly contributed to tactical and strategic successes. Your innovation became the foundation for modern signals intelligence processing. Every NSA analyst uses principles you developed, and you're not in any history book." Dalton was quiet, then said, "I just wanted the intelligence to arrive fast enough to matter. I wanted Bradley's breakdown to mean something. Looks like it did." Webb published her findings in 1978. Article in Naval History magazine. Origins of Tape-Based Signals Intelligence, a field innovation from Guadalcanal. Described the loose tape system. Credited Dalton. Included interviews with Mitchell and Chen and Morrison. The article reached maybe 3,000 readers. Military historians, signals intelligence professionals, veterans, small specialized audience. Dalton received 7 letters after publication, all from signals intelligence personnel or their families. One from an NSA cryptanalyst, 25 years of service, had used automated tape systems his entire career. Never knew they originated with a clerk and a belt punch on Guadalcanal. One from Bradley's widow, Stephen had died in 1987. She'd never known someone had fixed the speed problem he'd blamed himself for. Learning that gave her closure. Knowing Stephen's breakdown had driven someone to find a solution. Captain Morrison visited Dalton in 1984. They hadn't seen each other in 41 years. Morrison was 73, retired admiral, distinguished career. He'd tried for years to get Dalton recognized. Written letters, filed recommendations. Nobody cared. Too much time passed. The war was over. Morrison said, "You should have gotten the Legion of Merit. Minimum. Your innovation changed how we process intelligence. That deserves recognition." Dalton said, "The operators I trained knew. Mitchell knew. Bradley knew someone fixed the problem. That's the recognition that matters." James Dalton died on June 3, 1998. He was 78 years old. His obituary in the Chicago Tribune was 150 words. Mentioned his service in World War II. Mentioned his 40 years at Western Union. Did not mention the loose tape system. Did not mention changing signals intelligence. Did not mention the 200 intercepts. His funeral was attended by 42 people, family, friends, former colleagues, 5 people Dalton didn't know well attended. NSA analysts, signals intelligence historians. They'd read Webb's 1978 article, wanted to pay respects, wanted his family to know what he'd done. One analyst said, "Modern signals intelligence exists because your father figured out how to process intercepts before they expired. Every tape-based system, every digital processing protocol, they all trace back to his innovation. He should be in textbooks." Dalton's children learned the full story that day, learned their father had invented a technique that won battles, learned he'd risked court-martial, learned he'd never talked about it because he didn't think it mattered. Today, Dalton's story exists in fragments, operational logs in the National Archives, Webb's 1978 article, a paragraph in a 1995 book about Pacific Theater signals intelligence. Most people who work in signals intelligence have never heard of him. But if you visit the National Cryptologic Museum in Maryland, you can see a display on signals intelligence evolution. There's a section on World War II processing techniques, glass case with a sample of punch tape. Modern looking, clean. The caption reads, "Automated Tape Recording System, developed for Signals Intelligence Operations 1943-1944, reduced processing time by approximately 40%. No name attached, no photograph, no mention of belt punches or midnight practice sessions or court-martial risks, just sterile technical description. The innovation separated from the innovator. That punch tape is Dalton's legacy, not the official one, the real one. The one that mattered to the submarine crews who received intelligence fast enough to hit their targets. The one that mattered to the air units who received warnings before attacks. The one that mattered to the 200 intercepts that changed battles. That's how innovation actually happens in war. Not through evaluation teams or research committees, through personnel who see the system failing and refuse to accept it, who don't wait for approval, who risk court-martial because they can't stand watching intelligence die in transit, who punch tape at midnight because transcription methods are too slow and people are dying because of it. James Dalton punched tape to fix Bradley's breakdown. That technique enabled 200 intercepts, changed signals intelligence forever, became the foundation for modern cryptanalysis processing, and almost nobody remembers his name. But you do now. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Every like helps us rescue forgotten stories from classified archives and share them with people who care. Subscribe to our community. These intelligence innovations don't preserve themselves. They need people like you who understand that real heroes weren't always the ones with medals. Sometimes they were clerks with belt punches and the courage to break protocol. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Our audience includes NSA analysts, cryptography students, military historians, and grandchildren of World War II signals intelligence operators. You're not just watching, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for making sure James Dalton's story doesn't fade into silence.